everybody. Welcome to the fifth and final session of the Punjabi Film Festival, organized by Talking Films Online and curated by Balpreet Kaur. Balpreet is a journalist, writer, filmmaker, poet, voice artist, and university teacher. She has written and directed 4 feature films for PTC Box Office. She has hosted a famous show called Between Us, featuring conversations with celebrities from cinema, art, music, literature, and spirituality. She was head of a radio station called Radio Enjoy. She began by making documentaries for Punjab government and corporate houses before moving on to feature films, including award-winning films such as Lockdown and Mera Kuch Saman. Also on the panel to initiate the discussion, we will be joined by Ruchika Dhillon shortly. Ruchika is a graduate of Persian language and literature from JNU, Delhi. Welcome, Balpreet, and welcome to all of you here. Over to you, Balpreet.
Thank you, Geeta, and good evening to everybody. The film that we picked, the last and the final film that we have picked by default, actually. But now, after revisiting this film today, Punjab 1984, directed by Anurag Singh, I actually thought that it was a good thing that, because our choices were very limited when it comes to picking up these films, because many of the films that I probably wanted to share with you didn't really have English subtitles. So this film popped up as a last minute alternative, and I'm glad that it did. This is one of the finest films made in the recent years in Punjabi cinema, no doubt about it. And though there have been quite a few films on the period of which started from in the early 80s and went on till the last part of that decade, So this film was a very telling and a very, very crisp and I think a very, very candid account of how things really happened in Punjab. While I was revisiting it today, it reminded me also of Marches, which was directed by Gulzar. That was again along the same line. The storyline was quite similar. Basically it takes us through, how very innocently, very innocent young people, were kind of, either they were turned into terrorists somehow by situations, and many were killed, in fake encounters. Fake encounters have been one sore point of Punjab in 1984. And though there have been cases against many such cops, but honestly, many of them have gone scot-free still. So now, what makes this film really special, I think, to my mind, I'm sure to you all, is first in the way Kiran Kher and Diljit Dosanjh have performed this, their characters, of essentially it's a story of this mother and son, and the levels of performance that these two, and in fact all other actors, have taken this film to. When this film came in 2014, it did set a benchmark in Punjab, that, okay, sometimes we actually talk of cinema before Punjab 1984 and after Punjab 1984. It won't be an exaggeration to say that when this film came, Punjabi cinema actually got a launch pad, into stories that were beyond comedies, the cliched storylines that we had been having for almost 2 decades, So Punjab 1984 was a benchmark in the way it was written, in though the subject had been used, had been visited before that also maybe, but not so so brilliantly. And the way this film was written, and the way uh, the director and the filmmakers had the courage to pick up an actor like Kiran Kher, who was not a hardcore Punjabi cinema actor, but and it's a very big thing that Kiran Kher, with all her brilliance and her NSD background, she decided to actually come here and do this film. And the same goes for many other actors. Anyway, so for me, I think this film is first brilliant in the way the story has been written, the details of it, and how it has been interwoven, and how things have like been kind of, all the different threads of the story, they run into each other, and it's in a perfect embroidery. I think it's a very crisply written screenplay. And the dialogues, I think the dialogues written by Anurag Singh, and there's another guy called Surmeet Mavi. He's he's quite a revolutionary writer actually, and he does some really interesting work. So they have written the dialogues, and I think the dialogues in are one of the strongest points. It's unfortunate that you most of you are not really you don't understand real Punjabi the way it is. Let me tell you that the way the dialogues are written, it actually is one of the biggest winners of this film. The way the language has been used, the local language, the local dialect has been used, especially from the Majha belt. Majha is Amritsar. So, anyways, so there are some moments of the film which kind of cling on to me always, whenever I have watched it. I specifically love the warmth, uh, the courage that this woman, Kiran Kher, Satwant Kaur, carries, across the film, irrespective of the tragedies that befall her. She loses her husband right in the beginning of the film, in that, skirmish in Golden Temple. Not even a skirmish. She just kind of goes out to help somebody, and to like pull water out of the Sarovar, and how he gets killed while the police have police like there's a skirmish happening between the police and the terrorists hiding in the Golden Temple, on the Golden Temple premises. So I find it amazing how this character has been etched out in the way that despite all the tragedies that befall her, she loses her husband, then she has to deal with her son gone missing for a year. Then she has to deal with, he may or may not be there. And then finally, she loses him actually. But across this whole line of, situations, she continues to keep that humanity in her, that warmth in her, the way she addresses her son's friend, the way she addresses that little dumb child, who can't speak, and the way she deals with this girl, her son is in love with. And the way, and most one of the winner scenes is when she offers dinner to the cop, the assistant cop that comes to her house to warn her that, listen, you stop coming to that police station, because he tells her that, her son was kind of, he had escaped and whatever. So the way this character of Satwant Kaur has been etched is, I think, brilliant about the film. So I think she carries probably 60-70% of the film on her shoulders, Kiran Kher. Of course, needless to say that she's one hell of an actress. There are moments in the film, like, for example, when she and her and Bittu, this guy's Shivjit's friend, they are told that actually he's been killed, probably, so when they are traveling back by the bus, it's so real that actually, in Punjab, like, if somebody's going through a very scary situation, they will start reciting that Shabad, Tati Hona Lagai, Parbrahm Sarnai, the way she starts repeating it in the bus, and then she just starts chanting Vaheguru, Vaheguru, Vaheguru. This is so real. I mean, this, I think, happens to all of us in our own, respective faiths that we have. That situation has been filmed so amazingly beautifully. Again, then there are moments, when this girl he's in love with, she finally, like, she's dressed up as a bride, she's about to be married off, and Satwant Kaur comes to kind of meet her, and how she says ke maa mainu rakh le apne kol, like, mother, please keep me with you. And she says ke, how can I keep you? I couldn't even keep the keep the one you are, jiski amanat tu hai, I couldn't keep the one that you belong to. How can I keep you? That dialogue and that moment is so, I find it so heartwarming and so potent, in the film. So there are many moments, when Satwant Kaur is beaten up brutally by Deep Singh Rana at the police station. How he vents out his frustration, and how how the false encounters are filmed in the film. This is exactly how it happened. There are some cops, who are, everybody knows in Punjab, that those are the cops who did all this, but and really, and how that thing happened, it has been beautifully done. I think it's very courageous of Anurag Singh that he managed to show this. And of course, there are scenes, I have noted down some moments, when she goes to this guy called Pinder, one of the guys who had escaped his family, and how that woman finally, struggles and gets the courage to actually go and call out to her and say, okay, I'll tell you, that this is my son, he's injured. And, that moment in the film is really beautiful. And then again, as I said, that the handicap here is that the language is not really probably you're not very comfortable with the language, because most of the marvels in this film are because of the dialogues, the way they have been worded. So I guess there are many points, but I would love to kind of start this chat with you about how you reacted and responded to the film. But to my mind, this is one of the most true to life account of what happened in 1984, and very rightly so. The film ends with some of those people. They are their pictures, and how their sons were either shot right outside their homes, doing normal daily chores, or just walking around, and they were all false encounters, and so many innocent lives killed just because of a certain situation. And the police had a big role to play in they was trying to save their skins, and there was pressure from the government, and how this chaos unfolded. This film has managed to kind of really say it beautifully. Yeah, over to you, Geeta.
Thank you, Balpreet, for bringing out the the individual scenes of poignancy. I agree with you completely as far as the performance of Kiran Kher goes. She is, of course, a brilliant actor, and this is definitely one of her best. And you're so right about the fact that, yes, we have missed out on the nuances of the dialogues, the dialect used in it. And that is our loss, but again, something that we can really do nothing about. But having said that, I just had a few points to make about how I responded to the film. And like you, I also thought of Gulzar's marches. There are many similarities, and especially about how, an ordinary person takes to militancy after being exposed to police torture, either directly or indirectly, through, in the case of marches, it is I think the friend who is tortured, and then this person who's Kirpal becomes a militant. And so I too was reminded of marches, and also the scene of the bus, those, in marches, of course, Sanatan, blows up the entire bus.
Entire bus.
But here the Hindus are pulled out of it and shot. Now, obviously, a film that is dealing with the theme of militancy is, it's a highly politically charged theme. And, but what happens is somehow, the radical edge gets, blunted from the narrative, and it seems to be emptied, of its political possibilities. Because if you see towards the end, that scene in which Shiva is, roughing up that police officer, Rana.
Deep Singh Rana.
There, he's constantly saying, it's my, you hurt my mother. You hurt my mother. So it is, a sentimentalized, this kind of a sentimentalization of the motive, robs the narrative, I thought, of its radicalism. And of course, just like in marches, here too, at the end, it is the state ideology that is upheld. Because here is, a policeman who knows nothing about Shiva. He's an outsider to the village. And I think that his dialogue also says it all, these terrorists have ruined our lives. So he just kind of, without thinking twice, shoots him down. And you are right, because in the sense that that's exactly how things happened. There's, like, I have absolutely no quarrel about that. You're absolutely right. And I'm sure for you, it is far more personal than it has been for us, than it can ever be for us. But at the same time, cultural productions, like film and literature, perhaps gives the opportunity to set up a critique of state ideology. So while it does it up to a point, the mere representation of atrocities would, of course, set up a critique like this. But for some reason, and this is something I have always wondered, whether it is Dil Se or Marches or, most of the films that have militancy as its theme, there is a holding back. For some reason, there is this holding back. And then finally, there is a resurrection of the state, the status quo. So I found that kind of a thing happening in this film as well. I don't know what the others would have to say about it, but this was the way I responded to it.
Yeah, I agree with you, Geeta, that like you also wanting to say that probably that it was like the narrative was probably oversimplified without dipping too deep into the political aspect and other things. But the truth is that actually, if I were to look at Shivdeep's character, actually, Punjabis are actually so simple that they don't think too far into the into a thing. They just respond and they just react quite sentimentally. For example, when he goes and tells this cop, "Okay, my father was not a terrorist; he was just my father." So, as an audience, might want something more stated, but the simplification of the narrative and even the story in this film, I agree with you. Probably they could have gone deeper into the whole aspect, but the character of Shivdeep was quite justified because I noticed that actually the youngsters, the rural youth, not now, because now they are much more aware after in the last few years, the internet has really taken over their lives and their information has really multiplied. But in those days, and we are showcasing a 1984 youngster, so things were actually very simple. कि मेरे फादर को मारा है तो बस मुझे बदला लेना है. पंजाबीज की थोड़ी सी ये प्रॉब्लम है कि without going too deep into anything, they just react from a very sentimental aspect, which is also their strength. So yeah, you're right.
Okay, thank you, Balpreet. Anyone else would like to come in at this point? Yeah, Nikhila, please go ahead.
Yeah, just to continue with continue where Geeta left off. We a couple of weeks ago watched Chauthi Koot, and then this. So contextually, both of them, are of the same kind of historical context. The chilling, loss of trust in that marked that period, and the understated nature of the violence, which we all discussed and which we liked very much about Chauthi Koot, given that it was a different kind of film, a kind of realist genre, if you want to call it that. And then the melodrama of this film.
Yeah.
So this mode of melodramatic representation, kind of like Geeta, I too felt, for instance, that whole sequence wherein we are shown how the youth are framed by the police. With with one example, of course, but we can see how insidiously it worked. How young people were framed and imprisoned and also encountered. So this is a very serious issue, and that is the most touching part of the film for me. But after that, what unfolds, it's more like Hindi hero-centric film.
Yeah. Right.
So,
I agree totally. Yeah.
So that seemed to, as Geeta said, what it did was it certainly propped up one individual and made this into a kind of individual fight. Whereas the larger issue, of the making of terrorism, I mean, there are moments in the film where you see this at work, but probably the limitations of the genre, melodrama, and as you said, probably it's also the compulsions to reach to a larger audience. As you said, 1984 marked a very important stage in Punjabi cinema. Probably for those reasons, So other than the historical context, which located it in a particularly significant and traumatic moment for Sikhs, the treatment itself as the melodrama, I found a little over the top, also, as hero centric and so on. So that was my own response to the film Balpreet. But once
Absolutely.
again,
Yeah.
once again, thanks not only for stepping in to our and conceding to all our demands. So we are there saying we want subtitles. And so I mean, I know you're working with many limitations with regard to films and availability. But thanks, for suggesting all these films and giving us a glimpse of the richness of contemporary Punjabi cinema. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Yeah,
Thank
you're absolutely right. The melodrama and everything. That is what I was trying to say, that Punjabi cinema is still at a stage. So though this is a 2014 film, Punjabi cinema is still finding its feet. Films like Chauthi Koot, and I didn't watch Chum, but Milestone and Chauthi Koot. That is the kind of cinema that we aspire to take it to. I mean, but you're right. I think why 1984 Punjab is still, despite its melodrama, it is one big milestone in Punjabi cinema, because before that, even this kind of, serious work was also not being accepted. I mean, a serious storytelling. I mean, so even with all its melodrama, there's no denying the fact that 1984 Punjab was actually a step ahead into how we want our storylines to become, go beyond comedy. And the performances were, I think that Diljit Dosanjh, after 1984 Punjab, Diljit Dosanjh was like being taken seriously. After that came Urda Punjab and stuff like that. So it established these actors, from the Punjabi industry, and the Hindi industry also started taking over, the so-called Hindi industry, which is the popular cinema. Yeah. So with all its melodrama, it is definitely one of the most important films. It continues to be an important film in Punjab.
Yeah, thank you, Balpreet. Any other reactions, comments?
Hi, ma'am. Good evening.
Yeah, hi, good
Hi.
evening. Go ahead, please.
I just had a question. So, it's a really wonderful movie and very touching. And there are, like you mentioned, also there are scenes that really hits you hard, especially with the mother's grief that Kiran Kher internalizes, and it's visible in the very nuances of her expressions. What I wanted to ask was regarding the 1984, you said that this is a subject that has been dealt before in Punjabi movies, but it's very different from all of those movies. Could you elaborate a bit, because uh, the horrors of 1984 is such that it's often called as an the collective amnesia. So people collectively, in the mainstream, the mainstream narratives of history, they very easily forget about the horrors that the people from Sikh community had to go through during that time. So it's like the entire history has been wiped off in some way from the common narratives. But there are very few movies like this which actually talks about, and even Chauthi Koot also, we could see a little bit of that. So, ma'am, I wanted to ask, how exactly is this movie different from the other narratives that you were talking about, which were dealing with the same kind of subject?
No, the difference is not in the subject of it. They have all touched the same aspects of it. How how youngsters were like, innocent youngsters were, how they turned into terrorists, and how they were killed in fake encounters. But I think it is different in the fact that this was one first maybe, first popular film, talking about 1984 Punjab, which really saw full houses. It was quite a blockbuster in Punjab, and it was dealt with in a very more like in a very very sharp storyline and in a more commercial manner. People had attempted short films, and there are many films which I don't even recall, but they came and went. But the quality of filmmaking in this particular film was what I really meant by it. Uh, of course, another very, very marked film is, as we mentioned, is Gulzar's Matches, which is not a Punjabi film. But barring these two, really, recently there was the Jeet Dosanjh film. I'm forgetting the name now. It's just released recently on, I think, Netflix. Um,
I think you had Yogi in mind.
Jogi. So, barring these few films, there have been films that have come and they have taken some very radical points. I can take some time and kind of send you a list. But this film was a popular film which was received very well. That's what I meant. Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, Balpreet. Any other responses?
Hi, Geeta. Can I?
Yeah, please.
Yeah, good evening. Yeah, so first of all, again, I've really enjoyed this season of Punjabi cinema. And as already stated, thanks for telling us how rich it is. So for me, the immediate reference point, was Hajar Chora Shirma. Or in Bengal, we go back to the violence of Naxalbari, right? Mrinal Sen. They closed, the Calcutta trilogy. So, and I'm really, because we're all interested in aesthetics of film, I'm really interested. So I don't know very much about the trajectory of Punjabi cinema. But also as we were watching Gurvinder Singh, this came to my mind, Now, our aspiration somehow seems to be a cinematic idiom that in some ways clearly is not something that is very, is shared by many.
Pardon?
In Bengal,
I didn't get
similar.
you. I didn't get you.
Our aspiration, but I'm talking of Mrinal Sen, right? Or Ritik Ghatak or Satyajit Ray, the kind of neorealism, that Gurvinder Singh, being Manikol being his mentor, etc. So I think that kind of an aesthetic obviously emerges from a specific historical context and not just the NFDC and so on. Now, I was just thinking, and this has been coming to my mind several times, and I also watched this, the fact that this Gurmeet Ram Rahim is released every time there's a by-election.
Yeah.
And that women are actually voting en masse, for parties that do that. In Bengal, similarly, the Naxalbari moment is a moment we hark back to endlessly in some ways, as a kind of lost utopia. But I think we have to think much more closely about, one, why is it that we find that kind of aesthetic so endearing? And also going back to the point of melodrama, given that populism is in some ways the mode of political discourse today. And, I have in mind, especially Partha Chatterjee, but many others. And I find him so interesting because he's one political theorist who's looking at cinema very, very closely. Melodrama has been a very, very powerful mode of political mobilization across a range of reasons. And in that same week that we were discussing Gurvinder Singh's Chauthi Koot, in Tamil Nadu, for instance, the really hit film has been Ponniyin Selvan, right? So cinema works as a kind of, I think, shadow political structure in so many ways, and I'm not quite able to articulate this, but I think that moment of neorealism in some ways has either run to the ground or it has in some ways there is an impasse, but that we're not able to theoretically think through. On the other hand, there's a very, very strong right-wing mobilization, in some ways using very simplistic narratives, and making false equivalences, working very much within a melodramatic mode. That's in some ways able to speak to audiences, and I'm not quite sure how. So, in some ways, what I'm also trying to say is, do we need to rethink what radical aesthetics actually mean? If they still go back for us in some ways to that moment of the 1960s, are we actually missing something about the way in which things are panning out today? All our, in our imagination, that seems to be the moment at which, cinema became, attained its true glory. Since then, either it's been a decline. Now, if that is our aesthetic kind of framework, are we paying enough attention to how significant, certainly celluloid cinema itself has died, but new technologies, the new kinds of communities they brought in their wake? So I'm just thinking through all of you, and do you think that this is actually an intellectual trajectory worth pursuing? Because clearly the visual media have become extremely, extremely important. Should we then also rethink what good cinema is?
I'll just pick up the last part of your, observation. I feel that, I've often thought about it. Like, I grew up on the doors of Govind Nilhani and Shyam Benegal and, Satyajit Ray and Mrinal Sen. And to me, cinema is really, really that, because, but eventually over the years, I've noticed one thing that, closeting or kind of, putting cinema in a certain block, that, okay, this has the aesthetics and the storytelling, and this is melodrama. I think eventually what works for me is that it should be able to move me. It should be able to set me thinking about that, what the filmmaker wants to say, whether it is done in a very popular cinema kind of language, or it is done in a very parallel cinema kind of way. I feel that that becomes secondary. So I don't know if we really need to, I don't know, maybe yes, you're right, maybe we need to actually redefine how we really perceive cinema, good cinema and not so good cinema. I think eventually cinema's main purpose is to be able to make you feel something, and maybe trigger thinking. If it is able to do either of these two, I think it is getting wherever. And popular cinema does lack a lot of things, especially for anybody who's been watching all these greats, but there are some moments in the most melodramatic films also, which I think kind of, manage to get through to an audience and kind of make an impact. Don't you think?
Ma'am, yes, of course, and thank you for your time. But it's just for me a platform to think this through. Because, in class, for instance, in our college, everybody's seen Kashmir Files,
Yeah, okay, I haven't watched it. Yeah.
So what I'm suggesting is that in some ways, because we study cinema very, very closely, and you're absolutely right, I love Satyajit Ray, but most young boys and girls today in Bengal will find him passé. So I am just suggesting, not that Satyajit Ray is not worth fighting for, absolutely he is. Minaj, Ritik Ghatak, you name it. But in some ways, are we not, or are we thinking closely enough? Are we paying enough attention to the ways in which the historical context is itself changing? And therefore, two things. The kinds of aesthetic that in some, this category of the people is actually very, very problematic. But clearly, as you said, they're blockbusters. And some blockbuster films, in some ways, follow the narrative that we endorse. We like them very much. On the other hand, something like Kashmir Files. So how does that film work? And what does it actually tell us about the unconscious of Punjab or India or whatever? It's a very difficult question, and I'm trying to think through this myself. But like you, increasingly, maybe just age, I find myself, doing things that most people don't, and I tell myself, well, I'm just getting middle-aged. Yeah. But even in my middle age, I should be able to, in some ways, think about what it is that the visual media's become enormously powerful. What is it saying, and in Bengal, so as I said, that moment that we keep going back to, the idealistic moment of Bengal, and it's the CPM, that crushes in some ways the Naxalbari movement. This is the Congress, So these are, and the ways in which, say, the BJP will talk about 1984 to further its own agenda. So it's very complex interpreting. And I was just thinking about that. But really, thanks for a fantastic fest. I really enjoyed it.
I totally agree with you. In fact, that's a very, very important question. And maybe, filmmakers, whoever is studying filmmaking also, it's a very valid question for all of us to kind of pick up, yes. The historical and the study and the deep research is something which you just can't deny the importance of while making cinema, because after all, we are setting, this is all archival, and our youngsters are looking at things, through this medium. So I agree with you completely.
Thank you, Ajanta. Thank you, Balpreet. Any more questions, comments?
May I?
Yeah, please, Sridhar, go ahead.
No, I enjoyed the film, and there are certain other films released in Tamil and Telugu also. Telugu, for me, more closer to this is Virata Parvam. It's about a romantic story of a Naxal.
Okay.
So, which also talks about conspiracies planted by state and police especially. And like Punjab, AP police also notorious for making people missing and killing them in the name of fake encounters. I was told that the AP police is the most notorious in that.
Oh.
So, but the 1984 of Punjab is not much less. But I think the film got clicked because most of the revolutionary ideals that were circulated during that non-internet age might have inspired people and pulled them into streets or movements. But now, when you are looking back, the Virata Parvam tried to do true to the times. They did not want to dramatize it. They presented it, and literary values also too good, but it didn't click. It, as a box office, it did not make any dent. But here, I think that melodrama fetched it, and also it also both in a satire. You were telling the language part of Amritsar region. So that might also have helped it. So also it is also in a political satire is there throughout the film. Whatever the ideals claimed, you have good literary representation through songs, whatever we could learn from the translation. But also that is bringing whole ideals of that time. But I think the kind of subtle satire that they used in the 2014, the film about 1984, after 30 years or so.
Mm-hmm.
So that might have clicked. I think they adapted to the context and the very nuanced presentation that they have done. That's why it was receptive to the people. Whatever the romanticism about revolution or or the Khalistan, especially. Even they make satires. There may be truisms saying that whatever, whether it is Khalistan happens or not, but who will make the benefit out of it? Politicians.
Yeah.
So those kind of things are realizations later. That's a beautiful presentation, but maybe it's middle class presentation. I think most of this thing is bringing middle class. Brings most of middle class nature than the what it claims. No, we have to till our lands. Whatever happens, but that should be we should be free. All those things, they come the sounding its backdrop as rural, but I think the 80s is even not different in South, especially these missings and killings of people en masse. Later, after 89 in Kashmir, it has started and still going on. So many places that missing became a main weapon by the state. So the promotions, all that, because that it brought not only the facts of that period, but also nuances of it. What is it called? In a way, dissolution, disillusion. In an attempt like that, but in between that, they're showing that. That's why it clicked, I think. So in that way, it's a good presentation, this film. Even without knowing the language, we can enjoy. Thank you.
Thank you, Sridhar. Would you like to respond, Balpreet, or shall we? Tarkeshwar has raised his hand.
Let Tarkeshwar ji.
Okay, Tarkeshwar, please go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. I just wanted to join the debate. The debate is quite interesting. See, we are trying to do 2-3 things with the film that we have seen. One is to assess the film in terms of the form it has employed. And some of us seems to be having some problem with the genre in which it is made. That is melodramatic genre. But Sridhar seems to be, in fact, happy with this genre. Yes, the reference point, if we go back to that earlier film that we watched and discussed about that four-way path, Chauthi Koot. Yeah. So Chauthi Koot actually presents the problem in a very simplistic way. There is a state which is oppressing, there are terrorists, and then the people who are caught, and because of this conflict between the terrorist and the state, there is mistrust among the people. That's the main thing. And it comes out very well because that is the kind of form it has employed. But in this film, the state is also very well nuanced. There is Delhi, there is police, and within police there is corrupt people, there are people who are working honestly, and people who are changing in the midway when as the story unfolds. So this very, very complex things that they are bringing in. Even in terms of the quote-unquote Khalistanis, quote-unquote terrorists, there are multiple factions. And then they keep on changing their positions too, as they encounter new things, as the story unfolds. So the characters are going. There is modification. So in that sense, this film is more nuanced in terms of bringing us the representation of 1984 than the
Chauthi Koot. I
But-
agree with you. Yeah.
But as everyone else has pointed out, the narrative conclusion is about the mother sentiment and the hero and the relationship between the two.
Yeah.
So that is the dominant narrative, but all other things exist in the background, but they are not projected on. But why it doesn't project? For a movie of that kind, which wants to read larger audience, and in the context of 2014, when there is a dominant government is in position of the state, it is necessary for them to articulate things in a very nuanced way, and they are doing it, I think. So in that
Yeah.
sense, the question is, I think, not to dismiss it as
A melodramatic.
a melodramatic movie,
Yeah.
but to address the questions that others are trying to raise, why the popular films, why we need to look at the popular films, why they become popular. That means we are trying to address the question in terms of not assessing the film in terms of whether it met my expectation, aesthetic expectations, which was shaped by Sachin Ray or something else, Govind Nilani or other. But why people are accepting it, what in the narrative makes them accept it, and what is the effect of the film, and what the function this effect performs in the polity. That is more nuanced questions that we need to look at, and why people from different walks of life, different ideological positions, watch a particular melodramatic movie is precisely, the reasons might be multiple. So the reason for us to dismiss it is it did not meet my aesthetic expectations. So similarly, that we need to look at why people are watching it. And again, as Ajanta was also trying to say, people is a very a slippery category. But who are the people? If you can nuance it, that category, it's a category of people, and then make a nuanced understanding, then we will be able to understand the impact of the effect of a film on polity, or the relationship between the polity and the effect that the film carries. Thank you.
I totally agree with you, Thakeshwarji. You said it quite clearly. I also agree with you taking, just stretching a little what you mentioned. Actually, it is very well nuanced. You are also right that it is more nuanced than Chauthi Koot. Though Chauthi Koot is not melodramatic, and it is taken from a literary context, it's taken from two stories by Gurdiyal Singh or Varyam Singh Sandhu. I think either of these I'm forgetting now. So, in the way that I like the way that this film, in its very, very realistic and a very, very honest way, it also kind of, gives you a glimpse of how this Khalistani movement had its flaws. How there's this war between these ideologies, like this guy, one of the guys killed, he's sent to kill him, but he's not able to kill him and then the other guy kills him. Actually, he is quite a, strong leader. And, all these details, and eventually, the guy who's kind of at the helm of this movement, the guy who's kind of tutoring these two guys is like, he's one with that politician, who's, this is actually the reality, and this is a nuance which, I like the way that this film actually, as you said, at the end of the day, it is a story of a son and a mother. And so we are picking up a story of a son and a mother eventually, and it ends there. But in between, the filmmakers have managed to put in quite a few layers, in how things really were. And, the whole, the way that, the way the friend Bittu is killed, the way his father questions, and he says that he talks about aren't Sikhs suffering as much as Hindus? These are done in a very, very simple, oversimplified way. I agree, but I think the film does carry quite a few nuances as compared to even Chauthi Koot. I agree with you, Tharkeshwarji, completely.
Any other points, comments, questions?
The other point that I wanted to
Yes.
ask actually was the mother figure. What the mother figure is doing here. See, generally in all nationalist context, the nation is represented as mother. Though there
Yeah.
might be exceptions, again in Europe, nation is a father figure, and then maybe in a certain other religious context, it may not be so. So I was wondering, this melodramatic narrative, is it also trying to represent the mother as the Khalistani? Is it she's a surrogate icon for the Khalistan, or what we call as Punjab, whatever it is? Or the Khalistan movement did not articulate the nationalist question in terms of mother. So I don't know much about it. So if somebody who knows who can enlighten me, I would be glad.
I don't really think so, but you never know. I think probably the mother's context was picked only because probably it is more universal. Everybody relates with the basic relationship between a mother and a child, and I think it is a beautiful metaphor, to kind of and metaphor for forgiveness and courage and bravery. In that way, yes, it's a metaphor. How she's able to be warm and motherly even to the cop who has been really nasty with her son. So, but I don't know about the kind of metaphor that you are kind of hinting at. But that's an interesting, that could be an interesting observation actually.
Sorry, I'm not referring to you, Balpreet. I agree with you. But Tara, see, when the encounter killings in Naxalism areas, or the militant killings in Nagaland or Manipur or in the Punjab and Kashmir. See, whenever these things happened, it is mothers and women who actually brought the issue to trace missings, and they mobilized everywhere. So maybe that also we may have to keep in mind than mother as such. Women we have to see, because male are terminated in the name of terrorists or militants or Naxalites or whatever. So a female, whoever are fighting for them, they stood, and also because of certain, they only remained one thing, and they voiced it in reality. So maybe that is also one can see. Maybe, I don't know. Maybe I'm trying to think like that. Why just to eroticize mother figure? No. So women, we should see. We can enlarge it into a woman.
No, I'm not ruling out that possibility, Sridhar. I completely agree with what you are saying. But what I was trying to say, ask was, did Khalistani movement articulate Khalistan in terms of gendered being? Is this like Bharat Mata? Was it Khalistan was gendered in terms of, was it seen as a kind of feminine figure like Bharat Mata? Is the question that I was like, are Telugu Tali? That's the kind of question that I was asking, because I don't know much about the Khalistan movement, how it articulated it. Was it only the religion that was the basis for Khalistan? Because language seems to be not played a major role. But there are articulations that language also played a major role in the Khalistan movement. Both the Punjabi-speaking areas of Pakistan and then the Punjabi-speaking areas of India wanted to be one category. So whether it's language or nation, whether the language or the nation, did it got the feminine character at any point of time, was something that I wanted to know. It has nothing to do with the film per se.
No, I don't think the gender aspect was a part of, was anywhere close to the Khalistani movement. Khalistani movement was completely and completely, kind of triggered by the religion, and that sect still continues to create chaos. But most people in Punjab are just not interested in Khalistan. So these Khalistani forces are still there, and it was purely on the basis of religion. That just like Muslims, the Sikhs should have a state of their own. Punjabi speaking, you have many Hindus which are Punjabi speaking, but they don't really mean Hindus. They really mean Sikhs. Somehow they have connected it to religion only, the way I understand it.
Thank you.
Anyone else would like to step in? Yeah, Nikhila.
Yeah, just to again think about this film vis-a-vis Chauthi Koot, and certainly in terms of let's say what I would prefer to watch, certainly Chauthi Koot would be an aesthetic that I might go by, but that would not mean that this is a film that one would not take seriously or not look at the implications of it. So I was just trying to think, what for instance, the language, while melodrama is the form that it wants to that it is approximating to, it's drawing on a particular kind of mother sentiment, if you want to call it that is very popular in South Indian films. At a certain point in time, it was also very popular in Hindi films. So the mother, the sacrificing mother, her motherliness, which kind of becomes a certain counterpoint. Her humanity becomes a counterpoint to the entire movement in some ways. So does she become emblematic of the Khalistani movement? At least in this film, no, not at all. In fact, she seems like a counterpoint to it, because her humanity, which even encapsulates an enemy which can embrace the other, is what is kind of getting upheld here. And the hollowness of various kinds of ideologies. So it starts with the question of farmers, the issue of land, the nexus between usurpers of land and the police. And then it goes on to the Khalistanis. So there are many elements that are certainly tried and tested along the way. But ultimately, it is the evocation of an old figure, which is which was one of the markers of the melodrama, the central figure being the mother. and a certain kind of, stereotyping of motherliness, what it means, to mother, not just the son, but also be a nurturing figure, not being, in any way. I mean, she's so passive. So the police, she keeps going every day, and nothing that they do can deter her. So a certain kind of stoic passiveness, that kind of defines her. So it is all, that which kind of gets played out. This outwork of the context becomes, remains like that, an outwork, whereas this is what, I felt it was moving towards, the centrality of the mother, the nurturant mother, vis-a-vis all that might, seem like possibilities of redemption, and none of which work. And ultimately, the hero, kind of has to, he decimates those who have troubled his mother, and then pays for it with his own life. So it's that trajectory that was somewhat disappointing in some ways, I could say.
I would like to add here, just like while we were talking, it occurred to me that at best, Satwant Kaur's character is actually, I don't know if the makers really meant it, but to my mind, she's also a metaphor for Punjab, actually. The way her characteristics are edged out, she's very hospitable. She's always offering food. This is really the core of Punjab. You visit any Punjabi village, they will not let you come out without eating something. Somehow they'll kind of, their love will always be expressed through food, and it continues like that. I have personally traveled, through many, many villages, and we would be shooting anywhere across Punjab, and you can rest assured that we'll never be short of food. We'll always be first fed a meal, and then the work will happen. So coming back to so I think Satwant Kaur, it's actually a good idea that Satwant Kaur is probably a metaphor for Punjab. How she's full of forgiveness, and then she also has so much courage and bravery in her. I mean, even at her age, she's such a fierce woman, and at the same time, she has this amazing sense of humor. She's always a willing one, when it comes to cracking a joke and breaking into a smile, and she's so full of love. She's she's very forgiving. Even in the end, you also see, the mother of the other boy, Bittu. She comes and kind of hugs her. Even she is a representative of her mother. How forgiveness works. So I think at best, we could actually say that Satwant Kaur is a beautiful metaphor for Punjab, that the Khalistani movement and the police and the political nexus was trying to kind of, really, really destroy. Yeah. For the sake of argument.
Thank you, Balpreet.
I want to say something, Tara,
Yeah,
actually, because once one of my students presented on Khalistan movement, I deliberately gave. She's a Sikh student. So then I asked her, what is the it was in 2014, 15. So I asked her, what is the possibility of Khalistan coming up idea? Then she replied back saying that twice we have to scratch, they start from the scratch. We can't afford to think again.
Yeah.
With the partition once, and then with the Khalistan movement. So maybe that may throw some light on what is the present for the mood of the film also. I do not know. So that strikes me. I just wanted to share. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Sridhar. Any other comments? Jayanto, would you like to say something? Yeah, please go ahead.
No. Thank you. I think everything has been said already.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah, sorry. Can I come in?
Yeah, please go ahead.
Just a little observation that we've been talking about the melodrama, the element of how this is not an intellectually nuanced film because it depends on melodrama. I have a feeling that is the intention, that is the intention because it wants to reach out to a certain larger segment of people than an otherwise quote unquote, although I'm not very happy with this use of this word, and a more artistically, let us say, nuanced film would do. And therefore, he uses the melodrama with a specific purpose. But within that framework, he manages to be objective in the sense that it is not that he is painting the state as evil completely and the other people as being wrong. He sort of puts equal share of blame on either side. If not equal, let us say that some share on the Khalistani movement also as to how innocent Sikhs are suffering on account of both the interventions of the state as well as this movement which is called as Leher, which seems to be a very, very physical kind of an entity with the kind of people who are very menacing and they don't really bother about, human niceties, qualities of pity, compassion, and love and all that, because in their mind, that is not how a revolution is or a battle is waged, So all these things, I think he manages to be quite objective. And also, I think that there is a certain amount of intriguing indirection in calling this film 1984. Because in the minds of most of us, 1984 is that one horrific year in which, that terrible incident happened, what goes under the name of the Delhi riots and all that, but it is certainly much more than that. And here it is not about that. Where I happened to read elsewhere that Jogi, which is a film which emerges out of that, does actually deal with the city of Delhi, which is one of the places where it all began, the mindless backlash against a particular community, This film doesn't do that. This film talks about the genesis of militancy and how the state, as it is always want to do, will act with much more severity because it can, because it has the capability, it has the power. So that is brought about very clearly. But yes, I certainly agree that here also his intention has not to be able to arrive at a nuanced reason, intellectualized reason about what constitutes terrorism, what creates that kind of a thing, and what are the limits of accountability on either side. Here, by again, very correctly pointed out, by placing the mother, he has sentimentalized the whole thing. And therefore, the suffering of the people is that which he tries to bring as foremost. In that, he succeeds. And it is there that the the popularity. When I say popularity, I mean across a body of people who are quote unquote common people. And therefore they, just like the average Hindi film, particularly that of a decade earlier, it dealt with human emotions disproportionately. And the mother was a very, very active element of that sentimentality. And here it has fully made use of that sentiment. Yeah, but I think it was a conscious decision. Thank you.
I would like to add. I would like to add something. Something totally. I mean, just as a part of the conversation. In the moment that these two guys, Shivjeet and Tari, the poet, when they are about to bomb this bus, and then he withdraws the bomb, and because he sees his mother, in that moment, in a very subtle way, the filmmaker has actually questioned the whole idea of this extremist movement, because in a very simple way, so that when the other guys, like when their leader is trying to tell them that, okay, acha, good that you did not bomb that bus, good. Now I'll tell you, you wait for my further orders. So okay, kaun si bus udani hai, like which bus you have to blow up next, and in that, when he turns and when Shivjeet turns and says that, I don't think I really want to continue with this, I think that is a very, very very important moment in the film. In that moment, the filmmaker actually, and I think this is how everybody understood, that this whole movement came to a knot, that what exactly are we doing, what purpose will it really solve? So as I feel that, even if it is a very popular, the language of the film is very popular and very, very melodramatic, I do feel that the film actually does manage to kind of, push in, shove in the important pointers, important seeds of thought, that might have actually happened, to the people, among the people in that time. And very, very valid questions, actually.
Yeah, thank you, Balpreet. Any other questions, comments? Okay, in that case, we will conclude this session as well as the Punjabi Film Festival with a big thank you to Balpreet. And this October had 5 Saturdays, so you had to select 5 films for us. And we are really grateful to you for having put together this collection and for initiating the discussions. Thank you. Thank you very much. And thank you for the rest of you for participating in the discussions.
Thank you so much, Geeta, and thank you all of you for being such a participative audience and so receptive to whatever films I could kind of manage to think about. I can just hope that we are able to actually create more thought-provoking cinema in Punjab, and I think going by the experiments that have begun to happen at a small film level and at other OTT levels, I think we are going to kind of, pull up our levels of cinema in the coming years, for sure. And Ajanta, I hope, somebody, who's coming from Bengal, I mean, I really look up to Bengali cinema. I look up to South Indian cinema. I can't really figure out Malayali, Tamil films, but I love the language of cinema coming from all these areas, and I do feel that Punjabi cinema has a long way to go, but maybe someday, very soon,
Can I just
we'll
say
be able to
something,
kind of...
ma'am? You've got such a fantastic filmmaking culture. And I wish you would see some of the Bangla commercial cinema today. You don't have, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so thanks for such a fantastic selection. Thank you.
Thank you so
Pathetic
much.
copies of the B grade Hindi film, that is what. But there have been rays and attacks and all that. So that goes for all.
Yeah, and Balpreet, hope we'll watch and discuss one of your films someday on TF.
Yeah, in the
as
future,
well.
yes.
Yeah, okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Balpreet.
Thank you all
Thank
very
you.
much.
Thanks a lot.
Yeah,
I
good.
enjoyed this festival a lot. Thank you so much.
Thanks for
Thank
that.
you, thank
We
you.
appreciate. Thank you and good night. Have a
Good
nice
night.
weekend.
Bye.
Bye.
Good night.
Bye.
Bye. Bye.